Howdy, my name is Gary Yost. I'm a local filmmaker here in Marin County. Here we are at the Mill Valley Air Force Station, also known as the 666th Aircraft Control and Warning Station. This place was built in 1950, decommissioned in 1980, and has never been cleaned up. And there's a big project underway to restore this place to a natural state. I've made a half a dozen films about this place. The Invisible Peak, Mountains Made of Chalk Fall into the Sea, Song of the Last Place, Commander Byrne and His Daughters, the Tanthem, The Way It's Supposed to Be, all to raise awareness of what's going on here. And I lead regular hikes up here for the Golden Gate National Parks Conservancy, where we tour the area, and Matt Circle, a ranger for the Water District, and I tell everybody all the history of what's happened here and our hopes for what will happen in the future. In case you can't go for one of those hikes, you can come along with me today in this 360 tour of the West Peak of Mount Tamalpais, and I'll show you all around, and you'll get a sense of what's been going on up here and what might happen in the future. Come on, follow me. Here we are in front of the foundation of the old administration building. The foundation of the Bachelor Airmen's Quarters is up there. This right here actually used to be the base of the flagpole, and you can see the radome up here to your right. So the 666th was designated as a master direction center, which had control over two other radar facilities, one down in Los Gatos on top of Mount Umunum. That was the Almaden Air Force Station, and that's since been completely restored by the people under the auspices of the Mid-Peninsula Open Space District. And the other one was Point Arena, just about 100 miles up the coast. So together they had responsibility for looking at the horizon about 200 miles out. There was also a lot of control over additional facilities like two Navy picket ships, which had radar that reached over the horizon. There were AWACS, early warning and control planes that would fly around. And of course, there were two fighter squadrons. There was a squadron based out of Hamilton Field in Novato, and then another one based out of Travis Air Force Base. So there was a tremendous amount of control here. These are the ruins of the Bachelor Airmen's Quarters. This was one of the largest of the barracks here on the base. It was a big U-shaped building, 2 stories, redwood siding, held about 30 soldiers. And the PX, the base store, was right over there. And I've got a funny little story about that. So the store sold flash cubes for little Instamatic cameras. This is before strobes. And the flash cubes, unfortunately, were always used when someone went to buy them. So there were a lot of complaints about that. And one day they met the truck coming up from town with the delivery of supplies. And it turned out that as soon as the truck got near the radome, the flash cubes all went pop, 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 pop. Yep, the electromagnetic radiation from that radome was so strong that it blew the cubes from hundreds of yards away. And at that point, they started to get a little bit concerned about the kids of the officers who were growing up right down there. Yep, this is the most beautiful place in the entire Bay Area. A 360-degree view of the entire San Francisco Bay, looking all the way north to Tamales Bay up there near Sonoma County. And then there's Chimney Rock over at the southern tip of Point Reyes National Seashore. You can see all the way down to the Santa Cruz Mountains down there. It's like mind-bogglingly beautiful, yet hardly anyone ever comes here because they're intimidated by all the fences that surround this station. And look at all this junk. This is not what the most beautiful spot in the San Francisco Bay Area should look like. One interesting anecdote I can tell you is that every day, 2 or 3 times a day, fighter squadrons would launch from Hamilton Air Force Base in Novato. They'd fly over the mountain and go out and do their exercises in the ocean, over the ocean. And when they did that, the PA system would blurt out, "Bubble check," and everyone came out, and the bubble check was the fighters flying just over the top of the radome, the bubble, and everyone would wave hi to the pilots, and they would go on their way. So that was one of the regular occurrences up here every day. So I want you to note these square footings on the ground. They're all over the place. They have a little round hole in them. They're about 18 inches by 18 inches square concrete footings. We're going to talk about those later. This is the foundation of the multi-purpose utility building. It's just one of over 40 buildings and foundations that are still left here. The NCO club is right over there. It used to be called Top of the Rock for really good reasons. So in 1995, Barbara Boxer did get about $1.5 million to clean this place up. But it was really only enough to get rid of the asbestos, the wooden structures, and that was it. They left all of this concrete, asphalt, utility poles, wires, galvanized fences. Just the galvanized fences alone. At that time, they were made with lots of hexavalent chromium. That was the galvanizing process, and that is one chemical that absolutely does not belong here at the top of our watershed. This is the old mess hall foundation, and as Jenna Panzarella says in Mountains Made of Chalk Fall into the Sea, it's still a mess. In fact, Jenna painted the mural of Mount Tamalpais in chalk right over there. It was a painting of the mountain as it was when it was whole, before it was decapitated in 1950 for the Air Force Station. And it was made the day before a rainstorm, so the rain would wash the intention for the restoration back into the mountain. It's a beautiful film. If you haven't seen it, check it out. This space is also really interesting because you can see the inside of the mountain, what was cut away to form the Air Force Station. This is all serpentine, the state rock of California, naturally occurring asbestos, made under the ocean, which requires tremendous force and minerals that come from the Earth's crust. Now this is the old boiler room. It's full of asbestos. It's a toxic mess inside of there. What was the boiler room for? Well, this entire station was steam heated. And remember I told you earlier about those square footings? Well, the two huge boilers in here, they emitted their steam through these large ducts that were carried on stanchions throughout the entire station. The place looked like a spider web full of this ductwork. And interestingly, these ducts acted as reeds when the wind blew, which was often. In a big storm, these reeds would generate the loudest low-frequency humming you can imagine. And I just love that weird science fiction thought of these guys looking with their radar for incoming nuclear bombers, big storms with giant thrumming sounds. It's totally nuts. You'll never guess what's behind me, but it's actually the Mill Valley Lanes bowling alley. This is the only bowling alley that's ever really been in Mill Valley, and it was built in 1960 as one of the recreational things that people could do up here. Before it was a bowling alley, it was just this one piece of concrete blockhouse that was used as the radio room. And the radio was all the way here on the western edge of the station because it was the farthest point from the radome itself, and you'd get the least amount of interference from the radar energy emitted from the radome. And these guys in the radio room were responsible for communicating with the picket ships that were stationed 200 miles off the coast that would extend the radar another 50 miles over the horizon. So these guys were here on their own for about 10 years until the Army came in and a big renovation happened, building the new Army barracks, and then also putting in some new recreation facilities, one of which was this bowling alley. You can see that it was just kind of tacked on to the radio room because there was plenty of space out here. So, where am I now? Of course, this is Mill Valley Lanes. This is the old bowling alley. One of the many ways the guys on the station here could blow off steam. As you can see, this is the ball return, and look at these chrome and plastic seats here. The guys would be drinking beers and throwing strikes and spares. The old projector is right around the corner, sitting in the radio room right now. This is the area where the officers and their families lived. There are foundations left from 9 houses. There were about 15, 16 kids at any one time up here, and they took the bus to Mill Valley and back to school every day. And I did a documentary about this because the Byrne sisters found a bunch of old 16mm movie footage that their dad took, and you can see them in their Holy Communion dresses playing right over there in one of those pump merry-go-rounds. in the shadow of the radome, which is just surreal. Here are men watching for nuclear bombers coming in, and the kids are just kind of blithely playing and completely ignorant of what was going on here. So must have been a crazy place to grow up, but a beautiful place to be a kid and grow up here. I mean, right next to their house is this incredible hill with this beautiful oak tree. You can make forts in there, and then anywhere you go around the station is the most awesomely beautiful spot you can imagine. Right here you can see I'm surrounded by these jonquils that one of the officers or their wives planted many, many decades ago, and I come up here every spring during this season and just sit and meditate on someone trying to make this place more beautiful and more personal because they lived here. And here we are at the swimming pool. This place was amazing. This is a sauna over here and a snack bar over here, swimming pool here. There was even a kiddie pool over there. You can see the lifeguard chair right behind me there. This was built by Commander Byrne and the soldiers that were stationed here between 1957 and 1960. And there was absolutely no budget for it here, but the commander really wanted to build a pool because the weather up here is actually incredibly good for swimming, believe it or not, while Mill Valley and Southern Marin is freezing in the summertime under a big blanket of fog. This place is about 500 feet above the fog and is sweltering. It is like the most perfect place to swim in Marin County. And so the commander told the soldiers that if they helped build it, they could swim here. And that was NCO and CO. I mean, this place was very egalitarian, again, evidenced by how everyone pitched in and then everyone was able to use the facilities together. So with a $5,000 budget, Commander Byrne borrowed a dozer from the Hamilton Air Force Base, and because he was a farm boy in addition to a fighter pilot, he knew how to use the thing, and he drove the dozer and managed all of the excavation. In fact, he even had to use the dozer to pull an excavator out that they also borrowed from Hamilton when the excavator fell over the hill over there. But the commander pulled it together, and I don't think any of his superiors heard about that episode. The daughters, the kids, they loved swimming here in the summertime, and they would invite friends from Mill Valley up here, and it was a really coveted invite if you were a kid in Mill Valley to go up to West Peak and spend the afternoon one hot August day while it was freezing at home swimming in the pool. I'll bet you could never guess where we are now, but this is the original sewage treatment plant built in 1950, and it was used from 1950 to 1970 when I guess it had been so clogged up with you know what that it was pretty useless at that time. They had to build a new one. So what you've got here is a big complex of machines, stirring ponds, scattered throughout this part of the forest. You're only looking at one, but there's a whole bunch of them all over here. And there's just junk like this everywhere around here, and all this stuff needs to get taken out. And it's kind of ridiculous. After the sewage here was filtered, they would pump it directly through this part of the hill to the south side of the Air Force Station, and they would just like dump it out over Ridgecrest on the Mill Valley side, because that was not where the water district was. The water district and all the lakes were down here. They felt they could just dump the treated sewage out, something that would never happen today, but back then they could do it with impunity. Of course, they were the military. So this is the old sewage treatment plant, and now I'm going to take you to the new sewage treatment plant that was built in 1970. Here we go. And now we are here at the new sewage treatment facility, which was built in 1970 to replace the original one, used for the Air Force Station from 1970 to 1980, and then used for at least a decade afterwards by the FAA, who had people stationed up at the operations center. Now that center is completely automated, and they have a porta potty in there for people who need to use it. But this place, when I first walked in here 6 years ago, it looked as if they had just shut the doors, walked out, all the records. You can see here, this is the Tertiary sewage treatment plant, February 6, 1980. This was the last log that they wrote. And all the details about all their pee and poop are right here in case you're interested. And you can't smell it, but this place is rank. There's a lot of toxic chemicals that were stored here, and I'm kind of holding my nose right now because this is not a place you'd want to be. It's not a place that you would want to be part of your watershed. Come on, this is the apex of our watershed. Stuff like this does not belong here, and we are going to get rid of it soon. The refuse left by the Air Force doesn't belong at the top of Mount Tamalpais, and our community has been laying the groundwork for the restoration process to commence. I'll leave you now with a poem from The Invisible Peak, read by Peter Coyote.
Two philosophies have collided at the top of this mountain, on the edge of our turbulent continent. The modern view commands, win, conquer, seize the top. The ancient view declares, respect the high places where spirits dwell. Respect the forces beyond our capacity to know. Sanctify these mysterious places of dreams, inspiration, and awe. Respect them because they are holy. Could the disappearance of Tamalpais's highest peak perhaps be a symbol of our modern cultures devouring the ancient way, banishing the very summit back to the spirit world? But for those of us who still resonate with the ancient ways, who still feel the sacred, and for those who believe it must be protected, the mountain still rises to an invisible peak, calling us.